everyone. We'll just go ahead and get started by introducing ourselves. My name is Joanna. I'm one of the basic needs case managers over at Center Helps. I've been with the organization since about July of last year, so I'm slowly approaching my first full year there. And then I'll let the other two introduce themselves as well.
I'm Bella. I'm also one of the basic needs case managers at Center Helps. I started just a few months ago, so I'm pretty new to this, but really enjoying it so far.
Yeah, and I'm Kara. I'm the administrative coordinator, so I do marketing and paperwork and stuff. But I've been there for 5 months already. So
Okay. So we're just going to get started with some of the history and a little bit more about our organization as a whole before we start talking specifically about some of the resources that we offer and that are available to the community.
yeah, so at Center Helps, our mission is to provide 24/7 emotional support and connections to resources for anyone in crisis or in need. Our vision is that all people are valued, all people are informed, supported, and they're empowered. Our core values at Center Helps are empathy, empowerment, respect, commitment, and building community.
One thing I will mention real quick is there's a vocabulary paper that's right here that you have, and we're gonna come back to it later on in the presentation. But something just to help you all out a little bit with some things about our organization is if you come up on some of those words and we're talking about them, we're hoping you could write down what your definition of the words are, and then we'll, if you're not super familiar with the concept, we'll go over it towards the end to make sure that you're familiar with each of the vocabulary terms. They're kind of tricky just in general, so we want to make sure that there's a good understanding, and if you have any questions about them, we'll come back to that at the end, but just so you have it to look at as we move through some of the information.
And feel free to write any other words that you're not familiar with on the back. There's an extra space for you.
They're also just going to pass out some of it's like a timeline of our history.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about our
Yeah.
history, but we don't want to spend too much time on it. So there is a handout that has some more detailed information if you want to look more into that. So one of the more important aspects of our history is that it was started as an organization called On Drugs Incorporated in 1971. It was run and founded by a group of college students from Penn State, and it was operated as people could call into this hotline if they wanted to use drugs, and this would allow them to use it in a safe manner. So it took a harm reduction approach in which we understand that people choose to use drugs. We wanted to make sure that they were safe while they were doing it. So that's what the organization kind of started as, and it kind of developed throughout history to we merged with the Volunteer Center of Center County in 2001, in which we provide more information and referral resources now. So you can call in if you have a question about something, and our volunteers will give you information that you might be looking for. The rest is kind of just our name has changed a bunch. So it was On Drugs, and then it was Wellspring, and then it was the Community Help Center, and then in 2017 it was changed to Center Helps, and it's kind of stuck. The only other thing that's on here is that in 2018 we adopted the 988 Suicide Prevention Lifeline, as well as our information and referral hotline, which we'll talk about more in depth.
Okay, so these are just some of our key program areas, so kind of like the main things that we focus on and what we help with. So we have our 24/7 hotline. It's open 24/7. Our volunteers are there to answer calls at all hours. We have basic needs case management, which is what Joanna and I do, which we help with people in like financial crisis. So we help them out when maybe they're having an issue with paying rent, paying like an electric bill, paying a water bill. And then we have educational programming, which is kind of mostly what Kara does, along with her administrative stuff. And that helps people that have drug and alcohol offenses. So if they get charged with a drug and alcohol citation, we can help them try and get that taken off of their record if it was a first time offense. So it's kind of our main ones.
Okay. So we're going to go a little more in depth now about the hotline, and we'll let you know everything that's available to you all. We're going to start here, which I believe is Kara.
So we have a 24/7 hotline, but it also operates as a walk-in center. So you can visit us in our agency or in our office. We have a 988 call center in-house where you can either call in or you can text us. And we also provide free short-term counseling and emotional support. So instead of going to see a counselor or a psychologist, if you just need one short, quick session, you can come and talk to us and we'll be there for you. We also do crisis intervention, taking a suicide and self-harm prevention approach. So if someone has thoughts of killing themselves or thoughts of hurting themselves, they can call into us and we will be able to talk them through it and get them to a place where they're no longer thinking about that. And we also provide information and referral services. So a lot of our clients will call us for help with getting food or help with rent, help finding somewhere to stay for the night, and we can give them information based on that.
I actually have a question.
Yes.
Y'all may cover this later.
Uh-huh.
But so you mentioned that you have one-time counseling services.
Mhm.
Do you have connections with other counselors and therapists in the community that you could then, whoever you speak to in those counseling sessions, connect them with
Yes.
for future purposes?
Yes.
Okay.
So even though we offer the short-term counseling, it's not not necessarily a one and done. It's not
Okay.
like if you come in and talk to one of our hotline volunteers, you can't come back.
Mhm.
All of our volunteers are extremely well trained, but they are not licensed professionals. So a lot of what our short-term use is kind of to navigate a crisis that's happening in the moment, and then providing referrals and information to places that can provide longer-term support. We also try to use the least what's the word?
Least restrictive, least invasive.
Invasive. We try to utilize the least invasive procedures, especially when we're doing crisis intervention. We always try to avoid, using emergency services like calling 911, because we understand that sometimes utilizing emergency services like law enforcement or hospitalization can be more traumatic for people experiencing a crisis. So a lot of our crisis intervention, we try to de-escalate and safety plan and come up with things that they can do to keep them safe at the moment, and then try to use those referrals to provide longer term support rather than immediately calling 911 if somebody is in a pretty severe situation.
Any other questions right now?
Yes, my name is Abdel. I want to ask more information, please, about most clients call for basic needs about food.
Mm-hmm.
What are the basic needs? Basic information about
Yeah.
food.
So for the most, we're gonna go more into depth about the basic needs programs we have specifically, but a lot of the things that we consider basic needs is access to food, access to housing, things like making your utilities, so water, electricity, sewage, all of those things to make sure that you have your basic necessities.
Excuse me, helping them finding a house for them, something like that.
Yep. That's one of the things that we try to do at our agency. Yes. Of course. Okay. To segue a little bit more into that, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. This is relatively newish to our agency. We only started doing this in 2018. But we are, all of our hotline volunteers go through a lifeline training and other training that allows them to be certified crisis counselors. It is free to everyone. It is available 24/7. There's always somebody that's going to answer the phone when somebody calls if they're having a crisis. One of the things is a little bit about it is they've introduced a new thing. It's called georouting. You don't need to know what the actual word means, but it means that people who are calling in Center County are going to be sent to call centers in Center County. So if you're calling from the State College area, your phone call is going to go to us rather than your phone call going to a different call center that isn't in the area and maybe isn't familiar with the resources available within the area. So that's a relatively new thing they're offering, and it's to be able to provide more people with more specific help to make sure that we're providing the best services available. And then I think Bella's going to talk a little bit about 988 versus calling 911.
Yeah, okay. So 988 versus 911, they're very similar, but they kind of provide a little bit of different services. So 988, which is kind of what we have in our agency, is a crisis intervention. So if people are experiencing some sort of mental health crisis, so maybe they're feeling suicidal, maybe they're having depressive thoughts, maybe they're anxious, they can call into 988 and somebody will pick up the phone and talk them through the crisis. And we have trained crisis counselors. So our volunteers that we have in Center Helps are trained to talk people through the crisis, create a safety plan, figure out some ways to kind of move forward from that crisis. And we also can help give resources. And since Joanna said, like, people that are in Center County are picking up your calls, they can give you better resources that are more local. So they'll be able to help you a little bit better now that they know what's around and where you can actually go. We do follow-ups. So we do, if we feel like the person is open to it and it's necessary, we can give a follow-up call just to check in. I think it's like a few days after.
So people with what we call imminent risk, which means they have a very high risk of committing suicide or killing themselves, are eligible for a follow-up call 24 hours after the initial call. If there is less risk involved and it's a lower risk situation, sometimes I believe the calls are a few days out, just to check in on if they followed up with any of the resources, to check in and see if their plan that they've created to stay safe is working, or if they want to make any changes to that plan. Those are the types of things that typically happen with follow-ups, but the caller has to consent to them. We can't just call the person the next day for a follow-up call if they didn't want one. But it's normally, I believe, if it's high risk, it's normally 24 hours after the initial phone call.
Yeah. So, and then like Joanna had said before, we're trying to find the least restrictive approach. So we don't want to, call 911 or call, emergency services whenever we can talk somebody through the situation and maybe get them to a place where they feel safe. They, are no longer feeling suicidal and they're good for at least maybe a little bit until we check up on them or they can do whatever they need to do in their safety plan, like go to long-term therapy. So 911 is more those emergency services where you call the dispatcher, so the person picking up the phone, and they're going to send over a fire service, police, EMS, ambulance. And in those situations, the fire, the EMS, or the police are most likely, if not always, going to be sent to the scene. With 988, they're not sending anyone to the scene every time. With 911, there will be somebody at the scene to deal with the emergency. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is EMS?
EMS, it's emergency services. I think it's like
emergency
medical services. Yeah,
Okay.
it's the like ambulances. Yeah. Anything else?
Do you intervene only in the suicide crisis, or sometimes suicide crisis it's associated with other phenomena like hostages? Some person want to suicide, but he take hostage one or more or his family.
Yeah.
So do you intervene in this cases, or it's better to call 911?
So that's a great question. If our counselors feel that the person is at risk, at imminent risk, their life is at risk, or other individuals' lives are at risk, the hotline caller will be the one to call 911. So if there is a situation where they feel that the best thing to do is to call emergency services, they will. But they try not to unless that's an absolute, like you said, like a situation where others are then at risk. So either way, 911 can be called from either of these, but 988 is more, we're going to try and find a way to deal with the situation and not call these emergency services unless absolutely necessary. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Yeah,
But you provide just counseling
mostly counseling. Mm-hmm.
only.
Yep.
You don't use tools for rescue the person who wants to suicide. For example, if he is in the 10th floor
Yeah.
and you advised him, but he insists
Yeah.
suicide.
If
So what is the action?
Yeah, so then we can send emergency services, and we can even send either 911 emergency or mobile crisis, which deals with people directly going through a suicidal crisis. Yeah,
Our agency is not able to physically send people.
like our own people.
Our volunteers that operate from the call center are not we're not allowed to leave the building to go to a crisis. But Center County does have a team called Mobile Crisis, which can go do those things. So if we feel that a situation like that is happening, and we can't talk them out of doing something like that, the next step would be for us to call Mobile Crisis, and they would be able to send somebody to the scene. And normally, when we do activate Mobile Crisis, 911 is initiated as well. Not always, because sometimes the people who work with Mobile Crisis are able to de-escalate the situation, but I would say probably 8 times out of 10 when Mobile Crisis is called, emergency services are as well.
Your counselor are volunteer,
Yes.
work from the center or from online from their house?
So for the most part, they work from our agency. They are mostly comprised of college Penn State students that volunteer their time. So when they go on things like winter break or during the summertime, they are able to work from their homes as long as they have a quiet, confidential space that they can take phone calls from. All of our information is confidential. We don't talk about clients outside of the agency. So as long as they have a confidential space where the information is safe and it's kept to themselves, they are able to work from their homes. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So our hotline has a few other services that we can help callers with. One of them is providing hotel and bus vouchers. We offer vouchers or almost like gift cards to people who are stranded, vulnerable, maybe they're leaving an abusive relationship, or they're unsheltered during bad weather, or maybe they're all of this and have children. But we don't offer these vouchers for people who have shelter but just don't want to go, or if they're drunk, or if they're staying at a shelter but they would just prefer a hotel room. No matter what, if someone calls in looking for a voucher, we always provide them with emotional support, and we always brainstorm other options for how to get them where they want to go. So whether that be stay with family, stay with friends, or find other safe spaces or other shelters that they could go to if we can't get them on a bus or we can't get them to a hotel.
I will say that in terms of our vouchers, they are once per year. So if someone needs to get a bus ticket and it meets the criteria, we can do that for them, but they couldn't come back in 2 weeks and ask for another one. So it's typically we use these as like almost as an emergency situation to get people to long-term housing. So it's not something that we do very often, but it is a service that we provide. And then something else that our hotline is able to do is we are one of the registration sites for the State College Food Bank. So the food bank requires the people who use the food bank to renew their referral every year. And when that happens, they'll come to Center Helps. They can either call the hotline or they can come in during our walk-in hours, and we'll go through the food bank referral with them, send it to the food bank for them, and then they'll be able to utilize it pretty instantaneously. So on here, and I believe that you'll all have access to these slides, is just kind of, the address of the State College Food Bank. Just a couple of things about the food bank that we know is you can use it once a month, every 12 months. And the only criteria they have is that you need to live in Center County. It's a little bit different for Penn State undergraduate students because of the Lions Pantry. They really try to encourage students to use the resources the university has. But I do know that the food bank is pretty flexible if there was a situation that if they said you were not eligible or you called Center Helps and they said you weren't eligible, you could call the food bank directly. And I think that they would be able to work something out. We're very fortunate that the State College Food Bank is very well funded, which is why, for the most part, they can serve people who live in Center County and not just the State College Area School District. So if you ever are curious about the food bank, you can call the hotline and they can answer some questions. And if you would like to use the food bank, that's also calling the hotline is how you can get set up to use it.
Also, I'd add about the food bank. In case y'all didn't know, Bridget's husband is one of the assistant directors at the food bank. So you can always ask me and Bridget to connect you to the food bank too. And so what were you about to ask?
It's not a direct question, in fact, but in relation. Do you think the orders signed by Mr. the President of the United States regarding the food, distributing food, will affect your activities?
I can't say for sure, but I don't think so. I know that our organization, because we are a nonprofit, a lot of our funding is mixed in how we're funded, as well as the food bank's funding is probably mixed as well. I think that the food bank, as well as Center Helps, we're going to try and offer the community our services for as long as humanly possible. And I don't think that the order signed by the president will impact either organization, at least not at this point in time.
Hopefully not.
You said, excuse me, you said you, if someone asks you for the food bank, you will ask him some questions. What kind of questions?
So a lot of it is just demographic information. So your name, your birthday, your address, and then if there's more than one person in the household that's going to be utilizing it, they would ask for a name of them as well as their birthday. A lot of the information isn't super sensitive. It's just so that they have, numbers of who they're serving and making sure that they live in Center County. And talking about food some more.
Okay, yeah. So another service that Center Helps provides is we have a 24/7 food pantry. So it's an emergency food pantry that individuals can use usually just once a year, but there are situations where you could use it more often if you were in need. So we try to provide individuals with enough food for their family until that they can get to the food bank if they have a referral, or if they need to wait until their SNAP or their food credits are renewed, or if they just are unable to get to the store and they're struggling and they're not sure what to do and they have an emergency. Like it says, you can use it once a year, but there's cases where you can maybe use it more. It's open 24/7, so if you would need to get food at 10 p.m. at night, you'd be able to call our hotline and they would be able to get some information about you and your family and how many people are in the household and put together a little care package of food. And you could come and pick it up. We have a metal box by our door that slides back in and forth. So we can slide the food out and you can pick it up and go. So that's kind of a little bit about that service that we also provide.
And our pantry is pretty much primarily funded by the State College Food Bank. They provide us with gift cards every so often so that we can go to the grocery store and make sure that we have food available. But we also do accept community gifts. So like when people do food drives, they can donate to us. But I will say that almost always all of our stuff is non-perishables. So soups, things that are shelf stable and won't necessarily expire or won't expire for a really long time. Yeah. Okay. I think we're gonna move into a quick little role play activity here. So we're just gonna try quickly to role play a call into Center Helps. I think that we have examples printed out.
There's
Okay.
Roleplay activity number 1.
Role play
That,
number
yeah.
1. Okay.
Do you want to do it like we can pair?
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be
absolutely. If
awesome.
there's
Yeah.
enough to pair off, that
Yeah.
would be great.
Yeah.
Do you want to be my partner? And
So,
then
do you want to be the caller or the representative? Do you want to be the caller or do you want to be the representative?
Okay. And
You want to be the representative? Okay, so you start.
thank you for
Is
this.
there a question?
So we're just reading it out loud. And this is a roll call. So you read these. So whenever it says Center Helps representative, you read that out loud. And I
I'm such a fidgeter.
No, me too. I'm using this and I'm doing like.
When I do stuff like this, I pick at my fingernails. So I'm gonna try and play with this.
Hello. My family and I are struggling right now with our rent.
I'm sorry, can you tell me a little more about your situation? How much do you?
Oh, I cannot with this little bugger face. Every time I look at my phone, I just see this face.
Wait, what?
I'm not at Old Navy right
I actually went to Old Navy and I got the gray pants. I'm sorry.
But no, their dress pants are freaking fantabulous, which is why I bought them.
That would be very helpful.
And then they didn't refund me my $75.
As long as you are a center county resident.
And we'll go through some questions.
I know. Or they send you or give me store credit. Give me something.
At least $10.
You will want to leave your place
Yeah.
number and the brief description of what you are told. As long as you are a Santa County resident, are struggling with the basic needs, and we more, and we owe more than $400. You are eligible to take to the Christmas.
Yesterday, thank you, and I appreciate your help.
You are welcome. We look forward to providing these resources for you and your families for the basic needs.
Yeah. I understand.
Yes, I
Yes.
Did everyone do the red?
Yeah, lots
Okay.
of different.
We're gonna do that.
Yep, go for it.
Lovely.
Yeah,
I
Have it read
just
out loud
learned
in the
how
Bible.
to work,
get some practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you think that,
And
to get these benefits, we don't necessarily have to be a resident or citizen, right?
At our agency, no.
Because there is another program, Compass, I believe, and
Mhm.
Compass,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
Compass. And they provide lots of help, but unfortunately, in the end, they explain that only citizens and you with application,
Yeah.
it takes 3 hours
Yeah.
and something, and in the end, they send you a letter so you can't.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, you're still gonna be eligible with that.
So all of the help that we provide at Center Helps. It doesn't. You do not have to be
You
a
don't.
citizen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got one more role
Yeah.
play to go through real quick.
Did everybody get one?
You think so? And then if you guys want to switch the roles, you did.
So,
So, yeah.
You be the
thank you for calling.
And you said, I'll be the center.
My name is Edward.
Thank you for calling the center helps.
I do to
My name
support
is
I feel like
you.
I'm.
What can I do to support you?
I have learned recently that I would be a horrible teacher.
I
can't.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, center
also not
helps
a
offers
patient.
a 24/7 food pantry that is designed to help families.
When I tell you, I'm not.
What is the process
I'm
for
appreciating.
The food pantry is for access. As long as someone is in the office,
This
you
number
can call this
24/7.
number 24/7,
There's a drop
and there's a
box
drop
you
box
can
you can
access
access even after the office is closed.
That's so useful. Thank you.
You're so
You're
welcome.
welcome.
We look forward to providing these resources to you and your families.
We look forward to these resources for you.
So the phone number is 988, correct?
Um,
For the hotline,
For the hotline, it's gonna be on those.
we have those little businessy
business
cards.
cards, yeah.
So the 988 line will get you to the suicide prevention line, but the other phone number that's on there, the 5855 number, is our general hotline number. It's also going to be in the end of the PowerPoint. So if anyone who has the slides will have it. Also, if you just type Center Helps into Google, it'll pop up.
Yeah.
So there are a bunch of different ways to access the phone number. Also, all of the materials that are on the table, please take
Please
them.
take
They're
them.
yours to
Please.
keep. Does anybody have any questions about just generally calling into the hotline and the process of how to, ask about different information? It's okay if you don't. Awesome. So I think we're gonna move into talking about our basic needs case management a little bit and kind of this process. And if you're going through a financial crisis that involves things like food, shelter, utilities, this just talks a little bit more about the process that Bella and I provide at Center Helps. So she's gonna talk about the process and the eligibility and all of those types of things.
Okay, so yeah. So the Basic Needs Case Management Program, which is what me and Joanna do, provides a few things. We provide resource management, so we help give people resources that might be helpful with their financial crisis. We help with budgeting, so we go through a budgeting worksheet with our clients to help them maybe figure out ways that they can save or places that they're spending money, where to cut down. Funding, so if somebody's eligible for our program, so they owe $500 in rent, they call us and they ask for help and we can fund for them. We'll go through the funding process and try and get that $500 covered by other agencies in the area. And we also do advocacy. So our biggest thing is empowering our clients to just advocate for themselves, try and find the resources, and we try and help, but we want our clients to be the people to really do all of that. So we try to help empower our clients. So some basic need things that might be included that we help with could be fuel, it could be rent, electricity. We can even do vehicle repairs sometimes, medical assistance, and then shelter and budgeting stuff. So things that we don't include, we can't do cable. We can't help with a cable bill. We can't help with a credit card payment, and we can't help with like phone bills and stuff like that. So it has to be a basic need. So something that you need to keep you sustainable, alive, and well. So our program, we really work to prevent homelessness in Center County, and we want to do that through stopping evictions, utility shutoffs, and we try to provide referrals like to the food bank and other places for basic needs. So that's kind of our main stuff that we focus on and where we help. Do we do this one? First three, right?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this is kind of like an overview of our process, and it's a little lengthy, so if you have any questions, let me know. Step one, like what we just went over, somebody's going to call into the hotline, and you're going to tell them your situation. So maybe you're behind on rent, maybe you're behind on a utility, water bill, or electric bill, and then they're going to go, the counselors on the phone are going to go through some questions with you. It's like a financial needs explored, so they get some basic information. if we decide that you're eligible for our basic needs program, they're going to send you over to our intake line. So you're just going to leave a message, your name, your number, and what's going on right now. So you could say, I'd say, my name's Bella, my number is blank, and I owe $500 in rent right now. I have an eviction notice. And then you would leave that, and then we'd give you a call back in about 1 to 3 business days. And then, so that's step 3, and then we're going to try 3 times to reach you. So we're going to call you twice, and then if we can't get you on the phone, we're going to text you or email you, whichever one we have available. So we want to try and reach you guys as best as we can. We'll try anything. If we're able to help, me or Joanna will schedule an intake, and we'll go through the intake process. So it'll just be like name, number, street address, some information about anyone else living in your household. If you have kids or something, we'll get their names and birth dates, just some general information.
That demographic information that the food bank requires is pretty much the same things that we ask when we go through our intake process.
Just kind of that general information. And then we'll have a few consents that we'll have you sign, but those are just super boring. And so we're going to do that, and we're going to go through a budget worksheet. Like I said, we're going to go through, see where all the money's going, how much your rent is, how much your utilities are, kind of get an overview. And then we're going to make a service plan, and we're going to try and do a strength-based service plan. So we're trying to find ways in which, what our client's strengths are and what you've already done to help yourself, to help your situation, and kind of focus on that, because that's the most important part, what you've already done. Once we confirm all that information, we're going to talk to a landlord, a utility company, and then we're going to work with our local partners to fund for your cause. So that's where we advocate for you guys, and we try and get money raised from our partners to help cover the rent or the utility shut off or whatever's going on. Does that make sense? It's a lot of information all at once. Yeah? Okay, awesome. All right, so these are the eligibility criteria. So these are kind of all that you need to have in order to be given to me and Joanna's intake line. So you're going to need to be a Center County resident. You don't have to be a citizen, like we said, but as long as you're living in the Center County area. So we have the federal poverty level. So that's kind of how much you make your income. It just has to be at 250% or below, which is pretty high. So we can help people with crisis if they make pretty okay income, because we understand that a lot of people can go through crisis no matter if they make good money or not. Everyone's going to be going through something at some point. You have to owe around $400 or more, because if it's a little less, our hotline can kind of help you out with places to go and where to take care of it. But if it's kind of a larger amount, they'll send it to us, and we can try and see what we can do or where we can send you resource-wise. And it has to be a basic need. So like we said, no phone bills, no credit card bills, but if it's like a rent, utility, food, shelter, something like that. It's kind of all the eligible criteria.
We do have one of the most flexible federal poverty level guidelines in the area. A lot of other assistance programs are like 150% to 200%. The 250% is pretty high in terms of it, and it is calculated off of the gross monthly income, so income before it's taxed. I'm not entirely sure why that's the way that it is, because that's not the money that you'll have to actually work with. But we do have one of the higher ones because, as Bella mentioned, we know that things happen, and whether you make a little bit of money or a lot of money, there can still be a crisis that happens that's unexpected. So, so just to talk about a little bit about some of the resources that we would provide for different situations. We'll talk about rental assistance, we'll talk about utility assistance, and then I have some career resources, as well as just some other things that might be applicable. And if you ever have any questions about resources, like I said, that's great. Call in the hotline, and they have a huge database full of resources that they can pull from. So if you have an interest or you need information about something that we don't necessarily cover today, if you give them a call, they'll probably have a phone number for you. But just to talk about rental assistance, the ones that we typically provide, and you might have heard of some of them, you might not have, and that's okay. There is Calvary Church. They have a financial assistance program. It is pretty flexible in terms of what they can assist with. Their only criteria is you must live in Center County. And like we mentioned earlier, a lot of this doesn't necessarily amount to whether you have citizenship or not. It's just where your permanent address is in, like, if you're in Center County. The Salvation Army also has a financial assistance program. You must live in Center County, and unfortunately, they cannot assist with a first month's rent or a security deposit. So when you're moving into a new place, but they can help with rent after that. St. Vincent de Paul Society also has a very flexible financial assistance program, and typically their only criteria is also that you must live in Center County. They're normally the go-to for if you need rental assistance, utility assistance, or they've helped people with some super strange things sometimes. Like I know they've helped with a vet bill, and sometimes some of those other things that are necessary but aren't necessarily basic needs, like a credit card payment or like medical bills that are just a little too high for us to take care of. So they're pretty flexible. The Hope Fund of Penns Valley, they do provide rental assistance, but you have to live within the Penns Valley School District, which is a super small area. I wanted to include it, but it's not always very applicable. And then the Bellefonte Faith Center is similar, and they're also you have to live in the greater Bellefonte area. There are a couple of different zip codes for that, so it really just depends on where you live for that resource. But this is a list of the places that will can and normally do help with rental assistance if you or anyone you know ever falls behind on their rent. And then this is similar for utility assistance. All of those other ones that we already talked about are on there. And one to add is Catholic Charities. They're based out of Altoona, PA. So they operate in Center County as well as, do you know where county Altoona's in? Is it Blair?
Maybe.
I think
Blair.
it's in Blair County. So not that that's super important. Their only requirement for utility assistance is that you have a shutoff notice. So when a utility company sends something in the mail that states you need to pay this amount by this date or we'll terminate your service. And then to talk about some other things, so employment. We don't do a ton of like career counseling at Center Helps, but we do have some phone numbers for some employment resources. CareerLink in Center County is phenomenal. They offer career counseling. They normally have job fairs. They have all kinds of things that are available at CareerLink, and their phone numbers on here. The Development Center for Adults at the Central PA Institute of Science and Technology, which is a mouthful. They also have some career paths in, the science and technology realm. And then there's also a Work Ready program at Central PA Community Action, which I'm not super familiar with, but it helps people who maybe have been out of the workforce for a while get back into it. So the folks who maybe have a gap in their resume that need some help, finding employment after taking time off for maybe being a caretaker for a family member, or they needed to take time off so that they could raise their children and then they wanted to go back to work. I believe that program is for things like that. Interfaith Human Services is a great resource. They have a vehicle repair program. And something else they have is it's called a representative payee program. And they are a designated organization that helps people who live off of Social Security income make payments to their rent or their utilities and essentially manage their Social Security for them if they're unable to. So individuals who live off of Social Security, who struggle maybe with some money management, are eligible for a representative payee through Interfaith, and they'll make sure that the money is going to the places they need it to in order for all of their bills to be paid, as well as day-to-day expenses. So they only really have those two programs. They do offer budgeting similar to us. It's not extensive or long-term, but they are a budgeting resource if you need some help with money management, anyone who does. And then things for family needs. So the Youth Service Bureau has a clothing closet, which is open to families in the State College area. They have clothing for children, but they also have adult clothing as well. I believe that you just have to give them a call and set up, a time to make sure that the clothing closet is open. They also always accept donations of clothing. And then the mommy shop has a lot of clothing and things for expecting mothers with newborns and things along those lines. Okay, so we're going to move into the basic needs vocabulary, or the vocabulary just in general. We are going to go over some of the definitions that we have come up with. But if you want to just go ahead and take a look at that list real quick and just jot down some of the things you think you might know, or some of the things that you might have questions about, we'll move into that in a minute.
They're the words I don't know. I don't know what a representative payee is.
That's what I
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also don't know what a notice to quit is. Yeah. I mean, I get my context clues, but in this context, I'm not sure what it means.
No, I had no idea what a representative payee was until I started working with Center
Yeah.
House, and I went, "Oh, that's so cool! It's such a great resource."
Yeah. And I'm familiar with SNAP and the FPL,
Mhm.
and I know of WIC, but I don't know what WIC does. I've never heard of LIHEAP. Is that how you
Yep,
say
yep,
it? Okay.
yep.
Why is the first program I met
Oh yeah.
Compass? Because
Oh, yeah.
the electric bill was crazy.
Yeah.
We
I bet it
arrived here
was.
November.
Mhm.
Oh.
We were living in a home with a real good heating system. So my wife decided that that is better.
Turn the heat all the way.
There is some 5 something.
Oh
Wow.
my gosh.
Yeah.
And then I researched that we have
Yeah.
we figure out that insurance is
Yeah. Yeah. See, I leave it really cold in the winter, so I've never had to ask about LIHEAP because I get sweaty.
So we'll just go through some of the vocab, and you can jot stuff down if you feel like it. But Jenna and Ash are going to make sure that you have access to the PowerPoint, so you'll have the definitions that are on here. We'll go through that, and then any questions that you have about any of them, you can ask, and we'll go over that. So to start off, an eviction. I unfortunately feel like most people are generally familiar with the eviction process, or at least what an eviction is. So I'm not going to read all of these off, but it's a legal process in which a landlord can remove a tenant from their rental property, blah, 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 all of those things. So important to this also is the lease, which is, the contract that's signed between a landlord and an occupant for a specific period of time in exchange for payment of rent. Um, for the utility shutoff notices, in Pennsylvania, it's required that a 10-day written notice be provided before the service is shut off or terminated. So they cannot just turn your power off or give you a day and then turn your power off. You're required to have a notice of 10 days. Typically, in the wintertime, there is what they call a moratorium. And I don't really know entirely what that word means, except for the fact that they will not shut off your electricity or your heat if you're below a certain income threshold. From December to the end of March is the moratorium, and they will not turn off your power during those months as long as you meet their income guidelines. And I believe it's pretty high. I think it's at least 200 FPL, which is a little less than our program, but still a pretty high amount of income. So normally shutoffs will be sent out in early March for April when the moratorium ends, if someone owes on their electric bill and it hasn't been paid. To talk about the federal poverty level again, it is the income threshold used by the United States Department of Health and Human Services. It is calculated based off of the gross monthly income versus how many people live in the household. I don't know the exact math. We use a website called the FPL calculator when we do it, and it asks for number in the household, and it asks for the gross monthly income, and it'll give you a percentage. So we'll do the next one to talk about gross income. So it is the sum of all wages, salaries, profits, any income that you make in a month or in a year before any tax deductions. It's utilized in a lot of things, but particularly the federal poverty level. So these federal programs are something that you'll probably hear about. Their eligibility is tricky, especially if you don't have citizenship, unfortunately, but it is sometimes helpful information to have. SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, it provides food benefits on an EBT card. It used to be called food stamps. They've since changed the name, I think, to kind of decrease stereotypes and make it a little more user-friendly and a little less stigmatized. And you get money on an EBT card that operates as a debit card, and you can go to most grocery stores and purchase food that way. WIC, which is Women, Infants, and Children, it can provide supplemental food, nutrition, education, and referrals to healthcare at no cost to low-income pregnant, breastfeeding, and postpartum women, infants, and children up to the age 5. Unfortunately, WIC is one of the ones that has been pretty impacted by a lot of the federal freezing. It's one that our agency has been trying generally to keep an eye on, and I do worry that WIC is one that will be impacted over the next couple of years, just the way that things are going at the federal level. And then LIHEAP, which is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It's a federally funded program that helps low-income households pay heating bills. They have a cash grant and a crisis grant. The only difference between the two is a crisis grant gets processed more quickly. And it's based off of how quickly someone will either lose their electricity if they have electric heat, or if their fuel tanks are about to be empty. If it's within a certain period of time, they'll use a crisis grant. If it can wait a little while and will take a little longer to be processed, they would use a cash grant. Both you can get up to, I think, $1,000. And then once you hit that threshold, that would be the end. You wouldn't be able to get any more assistance through LIHEAP. I think, we've got a couple more on here. Yeah. So I talked a little bit about it with the Interfaith Human Services, but it is an individual or an organization appointed by the Social Security Administration to receive and manage social security or supplemental security income benefits on behalf of someone who's unable to do it themselves. There are a lot of different reasons why someone might not be able to manage their own benefits, but a representative payee is normally someone who's able to do it for them to make sure that their bills are being paid, that they have day-to-day funding for clothes and groceries and things like that, and that they're not using their Social Security on things that maybe they want but aren't covering their needs. And then a notice to quit, which is tricky in itself, is a formal written notice from a landlord to a tenant stating that the tenant either needs to leave their premise or the location within a specific time, or typically pay the amount that they owe. This is often the document that starts the eviction process. It's before you're given an official eviction notice. It says it's normally a 10-day notice to quit, which means that you've got 10 days before they start the official process of filing with the court to remove you from the property. So a notice to quit is just as serious as an eviction notice or a court filing, but it does normally, give you an example or give you a little bit more time to get things figured out. We operate a lot on notice to quits. It provides time sensitivity and priority to people who have them for our program. And after a notice to quit, that just means the landlord is pretty serious and they're going to move forward with filing with the court.
And then you get court fees on top.
Yeah, and then on top,
if it goes
you'll
to
have
the
the court
eviction.
fees.
Yeah, so it helps you save, if you can get the amount paid in that first notice to quit kind of time period, you can avoid those court fees that are going to keep adding on and on and on.
I think that's it in terms of our vocabulary, but okay.
So our last program that we do is just a small program, typically for people under the age of 21, who are first-time offenders of drug or alcohol charges. So if someone has an open container and they get caught by a police officer and charged of alcohol, an open container of alcohol, or they have a fake ID and try to buy alcohol and they get caught, they would come to us. Yeah, it happens a lot here. A lot
It
of
does happen a lot
It's a
here.
very common American problem.
Yeah. That's what happens when your drinking age is 21 and
Yeah.
and everyone under 21 wants to drink. But we want to provide a non-judgmental place for people because we don't think it's that serious of a charge, and we don't think they should be penalized or punished for the rest of their life because they got that charge. So we just want to create education about how to do what you want to do, but legally and safely. And that's it.
So I think that's most of the information that we have. We are moving.
We're building.
We are moving. So hopefully, maybe even next week, maybe we are going to be moving our physical location from South Fraser Street to the old fraternity at 406 South Pew Street. We have an agreement with the borough, and we'll have the first 2 floors. And they'll hopefully eventually turn the 3rd floor into affordable housing. But that'll happen in the next couple of weeks. And we'll make sure that we let you all know when we are moved, so that way if anyone needs to come and see us in person, they go to the right place.
Yeah.
Contact information. This is our contact information, so you'll have access to us directly if you need anything in the slides. And then this is just the general information. Our address will change soon. The rest hopefully shouldn't. But the last couple minutes we have are open to any questions that you have for any of us.
Or any vocab that you
Any vocab that you might have questions about.
And what about counseling?
Counseling?
Counseling, yeah.
Yeah. So for the most part, our counseling is when somebody comes into our agency and they talk about maybe what's going on or what's bothering them, and our volunteer that you work with will provide emotional support and walk you through the process a little bit. And then they can help you get longer term mental health support if that's something you're interested in.
And in one word, eligible?
Yeah, so eligible is like whenever you meet those requirements that are needed for a program. So you know the slide where it was like you have to be a Center County resident.
Mhm.
So if you're a Center County resident, then you're able to be a client of ours. So you're
Okay.
eligible.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
yeah.
kinda
It's a little
like-
bit of a confusing word.
And the synonyms aren't any
The
better.
synonyms are better. No, I looked it up even. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do you have some statistics about people you have helped?
Yes, we do. I don't have any on me right now, but what I can do is I can reach out to Jenna or Ash when we get back to the agency and provide them with some of the statistics, and they can absolutely share those with you.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Because when I see what you are working for helping people here, it's very appreciable.
Yeah.
That's why I asked for the statistics because I think it's a very big work that you are doing,
Yes.
and it's for free,
Yes.
for just for the helping the population.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Of course.
Have you watched I think it's on Netflix, The Maid. The show.
I have
I've
seen
seen
it.
it.
Yes.
Yes, she acted wonderfully, but created a resemblance in my mind with it resonated. Same story. So I think we consider to pay minimum amount of phone bills because at some point she couldn't reach
Yeah.
someone, and nowadays you can't survive without your
Yeah.
phone, with your internet access. I hope you will have a lot more resources
Mhm.
to provide this. But it's a basic need. And
Yeah.
the phone, I think it's very helpful. It's good to know that you are here, and I hope this from myself and from my family never have to knock your door.
Yeah.
But it's good to know that you're
Yeah.
here.
Our hope is to one day not have to exist
That society can support everybody.
Support
without-
everyone, yeah.
without needing
Yeah,
us.
and
But
for nonprofits to do the work that the government should do.
But we're here nonetheless if any of you need anything from us. And if you think of any questions, like I said, all of our emails and our phone
Yes,
numbers are
please.
in the PowerPoint slides. Please feel free to reach out at any point.
Thank you.
You're
you.
welcome.
Thank you very much.
Here, I'll stop recording.